One day you look up and somehow you're 27. Then you blink again and you're 43. And the strange part is, it never felt like life changed all at once. It changed quietly. The things you worried about changed. The things you wanted changed. Even the way money feels changes depending on what decade you're living through. Because life in Australia at 25 feels nothing like life at 35. And life at 45 feels completely different again. The pressure changes, the opportunities change, the regrets change, and almost nobody warns you before the shift happens. Today, I'm going to walk you through what life actually feels like in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in Australia right now. The money, the pressure, the opportunities, the regrets, and the things people usually realize too late. Let's start with your 20s. This is the decade everyone tells you is supposed to feel exciting. Freedom, possibility, adventure. And sometimes it is. You're earning your first real income, maybe traveling, maybe moving out for the first time, trying to figure out who you are, while pretending you already know. But financially, your 20s can feel completely chaotic. The average full-time salary for Australians in their 20s sits somewhere around $55,000 to $75,000. Sounds decent, until rent eats half of it, especially in Sydney or Melbourne. You're probably sharing a place, living with your parents longer than expected, or watching your paycheck disappear just trying to survive normal life. And this is where comparison quietly starts poisoning people. One friend is buying property, another is backpacking through Europe, another is engaged, another still has no idea what career they want. Everyone looks like they're moving at different speeds, and it messes with your head. Because nobody explains this early enough. Your 20s are mostly confusion disguised as freedom. You're making decisions that quietly shape the next 20 years of your life, without fully understanding the consequences yet. And financially, almost everyone feels behind. Savings are inconsistent. Debt is common. Super balances are tiny. Most people are simply trying to look more stable than they actually feel. But here's what makes your 20s dangerous and powerful. The habits you build here quietly compound for the rest of your life. Saving, investing, career choices, relationships, health. Everything starts stacking now. And the people who consistently invest even small amounts in their 20s often end up dramatically ahead later. Not because they earned more, because they started earlier. Now your 30s. This is where life stops feeling theoretical and starts feeling real. Your income rises, but so do your responsibilities. This is the decade where many Australians earn somewhere between $85,000 and $120,000. And yet, strangely, a lot of people feel more stressed in their 30s than they did in their 20s. Why? Because now the stakes are real. Mortgages, children, career pressure, school zones, aging parents, relationship strain. Your 30s are often the decade where life becomes less about possibility and more about decisions. And those decisions become expensive fast. The median house price in many Australian cities crossed $1 million, which means buying a family home can feel like signing up for decades of pressure. And here's something nobody warns you about. Time disappears in your 30s. In your 20s, you had uncertainty. In your 30s, you have obligations. You wake up tired. You check emails before breakfast. You wonder how everyone else seems to be coping better than you. And financially, this becomes an extremely dangerous decade. Because your income finally becomes high enough to fund lifestyle inflation. The income rises. And suddenly, life becomes expensive in ways your 20-year-old self never imagined. Suddenly, two Australians earning $250,000 combined can still feel financially trapped because the spending expanded with the income. And here's the part most people realize too late. Your 30s quietly determine your 40s. The debt, the investments, the habits, the health choices. Everything starts compounding aggressively now. Which brings us to your 40s. This is the decade where reality becomes visible. Financially, emotionally, physically. For many Australians, these are their highest earning years. Career-wise, you're probably established. But emotionally, something shifts. You suddenly become aware that life is finite. Your parents are older. Your children are growing faster than expected. Your body recovers slower. And retirement stops feeling theoretical. This is also where the wealth gap becomes brutally obvious. Some people in their 40s have strong super balances, investments, home equity, and options. Others are carrying massive debt, with almost nothing invested outside their family home. And by this stage, the difference becomes difficult to hide, because compounding finally had enough time to expose people's decisions. This is also the decade of peak pressure. Career demands are highest. Children are expensive. Mortgages are massive. And people start asking uncomfortable questions. Is this really what I want my life to feel like? You hear more conversations about burnout, about leaving corporate jobs, about wanting balance. Because by your 40s, a lot of people realize they spent years chasing income, without asking what kind of life they were actually building. And financially, this decade splits people into two paths. One group starts building genuine freedom. The other realizes they built an expensive lifestyle completely dependent on their salary continuing forever. And that realization can be terrifying. Now your 50s. This decade changes people psychologically, because retirement stops feeling distant. It becomes real. Your super matters now. Your investments matter now. Your health matters now. And for many Australians, this is the first time they seriously calculate whether they can actually afford to stop working one day. You also become intensely aware of time, not just financially, personally. You stop tolerating things the same way. Toxic workplaces, pointless drama, relationships that drain your energy. Your priorities sharpen. And financially, your 50s can go in two completely different directions. For some Australians, this becomes an incredibly freeing decade. The mortgage is smaller. Kids are independent. Income is still strong. Investments are compounding. And for the first time in years, they can breathe, travel more, work less, actually enjoy what they spent decades building. But for others, their 50s become a decade of panic, because they suddenly realize retirement is only 10 or 15 years away, and they are nowhere near prepared. Debt is still high, super balances are lower than expected, and starting late means time becomes the one thing they cannot buy back. This is also the decade where health starts influencing financial decisions. Energy changes, stress tolerance changes, and many people stop caring about impressing anyone, because they finally understand something important. The goal was never just making money. It was building a life you actually enjoy living. And here's the strange thing about life. While you're living through a decade, it feels permanent. Your 20s feel endless. Your 30s feel overwhelming. Your 40s feel fast. Your 50s feel reflective. But eventually, you realize every decade was temporary. And most of the things you spent years worrying about quietly disappeared with time, because life was never supposed to feel perfectly solved. Every decade gives you something. Your 20s give you time. Your 30s give you momentum. Your 40s give you perspective. Your 50s give you clarity. And financially, the people who usually end up strongest are not always the people who earn the most. They're the people who stayed consistent long enough for time to finally start working in their favor. They kept investing. kept learning, kept adapting, and most importantly, they stopped comparing their timeline to everyone else's. Because no matter what age you are right now, someone older wishes they started earlier, and someone younger wishes they were where you are. And one day, you'll realize the decade you were so worried about was the one you were actually living through. If this changed how you think about life and money, subscribe, because the next decade arrives much faster than you think.